Hi, so this is Cathy Skipper and Florian Birkmayer from AromaGnosis, and in the second video about aromatic shamanism we just wanted to delve a little bit deeper into the subject of aromatic shamanism. And I think an important thing to start with is just to remind you, we did mention it in the last video, is that when we're working with someone with aromas, we're working with the whole psyche. So that includes the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual aspects of the person. And within all those aspects, there's an unconscious element, which is really the part of us that we're looking to connect with the oils. It's this unconscious part of each part of our psyche that has an effect, and if we don't bring it into consciousness, it controls us. So the idea is to find ways of helping us bring into consciousness the shadow aspects of our psyche. And aromas are excellent at doing that.
Aromas work directly on the psyche. It's the only sense that goes directly from the nose into the head. All the other senses are filtered by an organ in the brainstem about in here somewhere called the thalamus, which is like a mixing board. So the reason you don't feel the clothes in your skin right now is because the thalamus filters that out. The reason in a crowded room you can focus on one conversation, not hear all the other extraneous noises, is because the thalamus filters that out. The sense of smell is the only sense that doesn't go through the thalamus, which incidentally is very interesting in psychedelic therapy, such as with ketamine, where all the other senses are often turned off or distorted. At the same time, we have over 900 genes in our genome coding for olfactory receptors. They're all over our body, all over different parts of our brain. So when we smell an oil and we say we work with the whole psyche, this is not just a metaphor, this is literally what happens, to the extent that receptors are real and really just another metaphor. But when we smell these these aromatic molecules, I always say it's like, imagine if you had an alphabet with 900 letters in it, imagine the poetry you could write. There's a reason why we have all these receptors. Plants, since before we walked this planet, have made sure that they can communicate with us.
So one of the important things to remember with this idea of using smell for the psyche is that smell is a sense, and our senses are about feeling. So it's very difficult, more or less impossible, to think and feel at the same time. They're two different parts of the brain, and in order to really feel, we need to allow, and we need to, in a way, I say we switch off, like a on-off switch, the thinking brain, the analytical brain, in order to drop down and feel what's happening. So there's a need to work on this aspect of perception, feeling, and it is through this feeling sense. So the aroma enters us, as Florian just explained, through the sense of smell, but the sense is leading us to feel. And that's one of the key things, is to allowing, really we become just a witness, and we notice how the scent is moving through us and how we feel.
So I want to reiterate, we are not interested in relieving symptoms. Oh, lavender calms you down and rosemary helps your mind focus. That's a certain level of operating. But again, to us, these aromatics are the living teachers. They're plant spirit medicine. And so it's not so much about the one function that you can look up in a book, but about building a living relationship. And the same aroma can teach you different things if you deepen your relationship, if you keep working with it. And that's really important, because that's how, when we say aromatic shamanism, that's really what we mean. It's not about, oh, this is going to do that. There are certain aromas, certain scents, certain essential oils are good at certain things, but within that, they teach us many different things. And it's that relationship with a living ally when we journey into the unseen realms of the psyche. That's why we use the term shamanism, so that it's a continuing journey and exploration. The other thing is, in my own experience, and I think it's true for a lot of people, my visual sense is very over-determined by my left brain, by my intellect. The same with hearing. Everything that I see, read, hear, the mind immediately runs with it. Oh, that's a word, that means that. Well, on the one hand, I feel we've lost our... I think we used to be native speakers in the language of scent, and we've lost that. But the fact that we barely have words for it, and the fact that it enters our brain directly, actually allows the shamanic process to go much deeper because we can't put intellectual defenses up as much. And again, it also goes to the fact that both the quote therapist and the client, you can't say, oh, you're going to smell this and I'm not going to react to it. When there's a smell in the room, that it's similar to Jung's 10,000-year-old man, that, you know, that third, that sacred enters the room, we're all touched by it. You can't say, oh, I'm not going to smell that. It touches you whether you want to or not. Like Jung said, you know, invited or not, God is present. We can say invited or not, aromas are going to work on us.
Yeah, I think one way of explaining it is yesterday we were walking high up in the mountains near where we live, way above any sort of human influence. And I kept smelling at different points the buck. So if you think of the environment, the landscape as the psyche, and what I was actually tuning into was information about what was happening in the environment. So if I was a hunter, I kept thinking, well, to track, I know that the male deer has been here and sprayed, probably for territory. I wasn't sure exactly if it was the time for mating, but it was probably territory. But that's a really useful information. And if I see myself as part of nature, as one with nature, and the whole of nature is the psyche, then that information is necessary for my survival. It's necessary for me to learn the territory, the territoire, to know how to navigate. And it's exactly the same with scent and aromatic shamanism. We're using scents to navigate the deep landscapes of the psyche. And so this is where I think, Florian, it might be interesting to talk a little bit about psychedelic, the way that scent and psychedelics have a sort of overlap.
Yeah, so I just want to make another comment about something that Cathy mentioned earlier about using our whole being, the physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body as we need to pay attention to it with our heart awareness. Our heart awareness is the alchemical vessel, and then in all these bodies, positive and negative emotions, and that's an oversimplification, will come up, and we just need to behold them, because if we don't pay attention, what's in the shadow will control us. So by using the whole body, all the bodies, we become an instrument of awareness. In terms of aromatics and psychedelics, this is something that has fascinated me for a long time. In brief, there's this amazing similarity structurally between a number of psychedelic molecules and aromatic molecules that I'm working on a blog post about that. And as you know, there's certain aromatics that actually have psychedelic effects, and certain psychedelics actually have a very distinct aroma, even the pure crystal form. And so there is this overlap and profound synergy. I mentioned ketamine earlier, of course, psilocybin. They touch certain parts of the brain, and the aromatic molecule touch those and other parts of the brain. And so you can combine them, but also even if you just work with aromatics, be prepared, the right quality. When we talk about, these alive oils, they really are almost psychedelic. You can have these profound shifts in consciousness, profound shifts in self-awareness. And I'm not talking about intellectual awareness, but really sort of that felt sense of, wow, this is me. And even more, I've been reading a lot of research about psychedelic therapy, and across the board, the theme, the benefit of psychedelic therapy seems to be the sense of reconnecting both to nature around us, which for most people is in their unconscious, and to the unconscious inside ourselves. And in the same way, and this is why I call aromatics the molecules of connectedness, aromatics invite us to reconnect, that we are part of both, that the ego is part of something much larger that Jung calls the self, that's mostly unconscious, and that is part of the entire world, and we're invited to be reconnected. And that's the shift. And the disease, the flip side of that is the disease of modern humans is really that sense of cut-offness, which not only do we feel cut off, but we're actually blind to the fact that we're cut off. We think we're not sick. So there's a double forgetting. Some traditions call this wetiko, but it is this soul sickness of cut-offness. And aromatics, the molecules of connectedness, remind us and reconnect us.
Which is a great place to stop for this video. Do join us for the next one, because I'm going to be talking about blending different oils together to help harmonize these subtle bodies and bring psychological balance. It's something that we've been working on and finding very, very powerful. Please sign up for this channel if you like our work and you want to follow us and encourage us to keep on making videos. That's at AromaGnosis.com. We'll leave a link below the video, and we'll see you here next week for the next episode of Aromatic Shamanism. Thank you very much.
Lots of blessings.